Hi, I'm Matthias Carsten from RME, and today I want to talk about SteadyClock FS. SteadyClock has been introduced in 2002 in the 8648. That was a MADI to ADAT converter, and there had been a technical reason to develop this kind of clocking. The MADI input signal usually is too jittery to extract the clock out of it, and that's why some units at that time had an additional word clock line running in parallel to the MADI signal. But this is of course cumbersome, and this defeats the purpose of the MADI a little bit. So it's more nice to extract the clock directly out of MADI. So for technical reasons, the MADI clock that you extract directly from the MADI signal has a jitter of 80 nanoseconds. And 80 is a lot in the audio world. So for example, if you have a very long AES line, like 100 meters, you might end up with 10 to 20 nanoseconds of jitter, which is already a lot too. For normal connections between, let's say, something with a digital output and into your DAC at home, you end up with about 1 to maximum 5 nanoseconds. That is okay and usually not a big problem. So SteadyClock was developed to clean this 80 nanoseconds of jitter down to a value that is 1 nanosecond or below, so that you can use that clock for all its typical intended purposes. So in 2003, just 1 year later, we added SteadyClock to the PCI card HDSP 9632. And from then on, we put SteadyClock into any of our products. And that makes a lot of sense, because you want to have a clean clock, and you want to have it in any case. It doesn't matter where your clock signal comes from. It can be digital like AECVU, or SPDIF coaxial, or XPDIF optical, or whatever. You want to have a clean clock, and in digital audio you have to synchronize your devices with each other. So you cannot use internal clocks all the way. Only one device can have its internal clock running, which is usually quite clean. And for the others you need the external clock, and then you want to clean that clock that you get from all this jitter. So the SteadyClock FS is a newer development that I will explain later over there when we change to the other workplace. Let me just show the normal SteadyClock functionality here on a small example on a test setup. We have an audio position APX555B over there that generates a square like a word clock signal with 48 kilohertz, and it has applied a sine jitter of 2.5 kilohertz. With an amount of 50 nanoseconds. And this word clock signal is fed into a UFX plus. You can see this signal here on the first channel on the oscilloscope. Peak to peak, these are now 100 nanoseconds of jitter. And the UFX plus clocks on this jittery signal. The SteadyClock processes this clock signal and cleans it up, and the result is what you see down here. This is the output of the UFX plus. All the jitter is gone. Now the point is that, of course, this clock cleaning is not only done for the digital output. This clock signal is used for everything inside the unit. That means AD conversion, DA conversion, all the digital outputs, everything is run with that one. So you may ask, what is the problem with jitter? Well, that's easy. A jittery signal is like a signal that is not steady, but we're doing strange things up and down, so to say. And what happens then is that with higher amounts of jitter, you get compatibility problems. That means your SPDIF or AS input might not lock anymore, might not be stable, drops the sync or something like that. And if you use this kind of clock for DA conversion, it's even worse, because the DA converter reacts directly on it. What you can get is some kind of sidebands to the pure original signal. You can get a modulated noise floor, or you can just get more noise at all. Things like that. So that's why you really want to avoid too much jitter. The jitter that we saw on the digital storage oscilloscope is so-called interface jitter. The jitter that happens on the digital interface path. That means from AECVU output to input, or from SPDIF output to input. This kind of jitter is not very critical So if you hear about values between 1 and 5 nanoseconds, it's not a problem. This might sound astonishing because usually you hear about jitter values in the picosecond area, or maybe even lower with femtosecond. This kind of jitter is typically sampling jitter. That means the jitter that happens within the AD and DA conversion and which can directly influence the audio quality. So I will show now how this kind of jitter affects the AD-DA conversion. We will have the APX555B using a test jitter signal, feeding this into 3 different DACs, one with SteadyClock, one with SteadyClock FS, and one without anything, just the normal SPDIF receivership, which clocks then the DA converter, which is quite usual and popular. We will show on the screen here the different results that you get and how much audio is affected by it. This is the user interface of the audio precision system, and it's now configured in a way that it's very easy to show jitter effects on DA conversion. For this, just as explanation, on the left side here we have the input-output section. It's now configured to digital optical output, 48 kHz, which runs into the DAC. Below there is the input configuration. We use the XLR balanced lines right now. And here is the generator that produces the 10 kHz sine signal, which you can already see here in the FFT. And on an additional page here, we can set up the jitter effects. So right now we have the jitter chosen as a sine of 2.5 kHz, and right here you can adjust the amount of jitter that you want to apply. The nice thing about this kind of jitter measurement is that the 2.5 kHz modulation, the jitter itself, will be visible inside the FFT as 12.5 kHz and 7.5 kHz signal, basically mirrored to the 10 kHz signal, so easy to read and easy to see. And that's what we will do now with 3 different DACs. I prepared some measurements to show the effects of jitter on the analog output of the DA conversion. And I would like to start with a unit that does not have any active jitter reduction within the audio band. Interestingly, this unit uses an AKM4490 chip, the same DAC chip that is built into the ADI2 DAC. Now, if you have a little bit experience with this kind of FFT measurements, you will notice that here, where we see a nearly full-scale 10 kHz sine, the noise floor shown at minus 130 dB is too high. If you compare this to an ADI2 DAC measurement, then you will see the noise floor there is at about minus 155, using the same DAC chip. So this noise might either be a bad hardware implementation on the analog output side, or might already be a jitter artifact. Jitter can be sidebands, lots of kind of needles shown here, or noise modulations in any kind. Even a broadband noise modulation is possible. So let's see what happens if we change the so far jitter-free input signal to one that has 1 nanoseconds of jitter on it. We immediately see the sidebands, 2.5 kHz distance from the center one. And here the jitter modulated sidebands reach a level on about minus 94 dB, which is about CD quality. This is with only 1 nanoseconds of jitter. Higher jitter values, of course, cause higher sidebands. This is 10 nanoseconds, this is 20 nanoseconds, and finally 50 nanoseconds. Now we reach about minus 60 dB. What happens if we go down with the jitter? Let's say we have an ideal transmission. The interface jitter is quite low, so let's try with only 100 picoseconds. This is 100 picoseconds of jitter on the optical input, and even here you can see the sidebands clearly out of the noise floor. They now reach a level of about minus 114 dB. So to show these effects on a SteadyClock device, I measured the Firephase UC. The Firephase UC has an older AD-DA converter in it as the modern units. So basically it's not on a level with an AK4490, but you can see here that the UC still provides a lower noise floor. It has a better analog implementation and clock implementation than the other unit that uses the latest AK4490 chip. So let's now apply some jitter to the optical input signal of the 5S UC. And I just did one measurement because that is enough to show it's 20 nanoseconds of jitter. And you can see the sidebands again. They are at about minus 119 dB. Now compare this to a unit that doesn't have SteadyClock. 20 nanoseconds again. We had at that measurement about minus 68. So SteadyClock indeed reduces the jitter by not only 30 dB like we advertise it, but a lot more. Now SteadyClock FS is advertised as having an even higher jitter reduction and also less self-jitter. So let's see what the ADI2 DUC does with all this. This is the jitter-free optical input signal for the ADI2 DUC with a very low noise floor of about minus 155 in this measurement. And now let's apply a whopping 50 nanoseconds of digital jitter. Yes, there are no sidebands visible. This is 100 nanoseconds, still nothing visible. And this is a really ridiculously high 150 nanoseconds of jitter. Nothing. Conclusion?